Yo, 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 what's going on? What's going on? Uh, Polo Sports Talking ENT and Polo Sports News Plus. Y'all gotta excuse me, man. I know I'm running a little bit late. I got a lot of stuff that's going on, a lot of stuff that I gotta take care of. I thank each and every one of you for being patient with your boy. But nevertheless, uh, your boy's still grinding, still hustling, man. Uh, it's been a lot of talk. Well, I mean, this is always the topic that always comes up. I mean, you go anywhere, this topic is always gonna come up, and it's a nice debate between the two eras and everything. And I am an '80s baby. Okay, I am an '80s baby. I did see a little bit. Now I wasn't like grasping the concept like some of the '70s, like some of the '70s babies, and of course the '60s and damn sure the '50s babies were the baby boom or whatever you want to call them. But I did grow up in the '90s and then of course the 2000s, and I was blessed to be able to see all the different styles of basketball that we talk about. Uh, when you talk about the '70s, you talk about a time period when there really wasn't there. There's 3 points. The '60s and the '70s, there wasn't really no 3-point shot. Uh, there were a lot of it was a lot of transitional period because every era had its different transition, so to speak. But I think like some people, they look at like the '70s, they look at the '80s, they look at the '90s, 2000s, and even this generation, and then they say, you said Sidney Moncrief and Moses Malone were my favorite. Oh, okay. Salute to you, Red Pill. Um, when you look at the '80s and you look at the '90s and the 2000s, everybody just bases they base everything just on physicality alone. And I there's a lot of people, man, that might think that just because I like Jordan, or I like Hakeem, or uh, some of these other guys that I like, they automatically think, okay, well, you must have liked '90s basketball. And to a point, I did. Matter of fact, yesterday I was talking about two of the guys that I absolutely love to watch. When I was watching the '90s, man, you'd be surprised what I like. But of course, Jordan, of course. But I used to like the guys that used to like to do it all. That pretty much could fill up a stat sheet, so to speak. Like when I was talking about Penny Hardaway and talking about Grant Hill, even though Grant Hill was a Hall of Famer, but I'm talking about pre-injury Grant Hill and pre-injury Penny. Uh, but of course, I did like watching Jason Kidd, and I love what I used to like watching Baron Davis. Of course, that came in. He went right on into the 2000s and everything. But there was a whole lot of other players that I used to like watching. Uh, you said, CB Lighter, you said the '80s were overrated. Nah, not at all. The '80s were not overrated at all. Um, if anything, if you really want to be honest with you, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. The uh, the 90's were, you could say that about the 90's. Okay, and listen, I hey, I love Jordan. Jordan to me is at the top of my list, no doubt. But man, when you talk about the 80's, man, you're talking about a time period where you take physicality, you take fundamental, and you take skill, uh, coupled with the fact that they did actually play. Teams were actually. It was just a lot of combination of teams that were tough to get through, and the team that ran the 80's was, of course, yeah. I think the Boston Celtics had the most championships in the 80's. There's 81, 84, and 86. Then, of course, you had the Celtics. You had the Celtics in the 80. Wait, because Magic won 70, won 79, 80. Okay, yeah, because Magic had five chips. Larry Bird only had three of those. But I have to think about that because no, it was the Lakers that actually ran the 80's. I'm sorry, excuse me. But then you had Detroit that won two because they won in 88, 89, and 90. Uh, you had some dominant teams in there, and everybody just looks at the 80's as being overrated. No, absolutely not, CB Logic. I'm talking about both. What's up, Omega Red? I see you in the building. I'm talking about both, CB Logic. Uh, you got to think about it. Dominique Wilkins was nice. Now he wasn't successful, but it, if you want to talk individually, he was nice. He could do it all. He could shoot a little bit. Now he wasn't shooting a lot of 3 pointers. Nobody really was back then, maybe with the exception of Bird and Dell Ellis, just to name a few. And to a certain, I would say, who else? Because Reggie came in, he was shooting a little bit, but the three, Hershey Hawkins, guys like that, it was a delicacy. You know what I'm saying? They took 3 point shooting. Hey, that was a special. That was just for a specialist. It wasn't like you know, daggone Jokic, guys like that, and Dirk Nowitzki's, and even Kevin Durant. You never seen a player in like a Kevin Durant in the 80's. CB Logic. So you can't. It's natural for you to say something like that. Uh, Guys weren't pulling up from 40 like Steph Curry and all of that stuff. And plus, uh, now I know that they say that there weren't any zone defenses and stuff, but sometimes they did, like for instance, against Michael Jordan, they they would kind of they would use a floating zone, but you really you could recognize it and everything, but it wasn't really that common. But Jordan was always facing double teams, triple teams sometimes, and stuff. He rarely faced one-on-one defense. So and they tried to double many other players. They tried to double Dominique Wilkins sometimes. A great scorer. Uh, many other players and stuff. So we can't sit here and say that the 80's were overrated. Because in my opinion, you got to think about it. Who did the Bulls have the most trouble with? Who did the Pistons have the most trouble with? The Pistons had trouble with the Boston Celtics. The Celtics, and the Boston. I mean, the Celtics and the Lakers were a story rivalry. Right, but you got to think about when he came in. You got to think about when he came in. Logic, logic. What you have to understand is that Hershey Hawkins, yeah, he was in the 90s, but he came in 88. That's still the 80s. Okay, so you have to understand that. You were still playing in the 80s. I know it was about to go into the 90s and everything, but by far, right. Yeah, Pippen was drafted in 87. They still played in the 80s. Jordan played in the 80s. He was drafted in the early 80s. So we can't say that, you can't say that these players were overrated. If anything, I wouldn't put the 90s up against like like the 2000s or anything like that, because there weren't. It was to me, there were more. You had hell to deal with when those guys were younger. You talking about Magic. You talk about you talk about Worthy. You talk about Jordan. You talk about Dominique Wilkins. You talk about what's his name? It just said Red Pill. He said Sidney Moncrief. Uh, Shoot, a whole lot of guards. Back then in the 80s. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars. And they could play defense too. So we can't sit up here and just discount now the 90s. They had decent, but the only guard that was really causing the terror pretty much for the most part was just Michael Jordan. And they pretty much ran that era in the 90s. So if you look at the 90s, there weren't a lot of teams that had a lot of shot. But in the 80s, it was much more competition. There was much more parity. You said, I thought you were talking about how they played in the 80s. Yeah, Logic, I'm talking about, man, let me get you in here because I think let me just get you in here. We have to have this talk. Go ahead and come in when you can, Logic. I put the link down there so that you could come in and flex your opinion. Because this is a this is a this is a discussion that goes on and on. People look at the 90s as, oh, it was really, really, really physical and all this other stuff. It was, I mean, it was physical, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as physical as the 80s. And to me, the skills, the skill set was by far, it was, to me, it was better in the 80s. Especially when you talk about team basketball. They were talking about. I know Michael Jordan. He had saved the NBA. What's up, CB?
Yo, what's up? What's up? No, I was saying 80's are overrated to get you riled up, but no, I wouldn't say it's overrated, but I'm saying if you're gonna I was wondering your criteria. Are you saying like if they were drafted in the 80's or how they played in that era in the 80's?
Well, initially, I was talking about just the style of play, and
Mm.
also the players that played during that time. Because even if you were drafted during that time, you still had to think, what if Hershey Hawkins had been good? You got to think about it. Michael Jordan got drafted in the 80s. What if he didn't get? What if he didn't get better toward the? I got an echo. Is that you?
Do you hear
Is
now?
that you, Logic? Okay, yeah, I had heard an echo. No, but what if that team, what if that player had got, he got drafted, like let's say at the tipping point of the early 90s, and he came in dominating, like at 88, or like at 87. What if Pippen would have been dominating at 87? Then you could actually say, okay, well, dang, Pippen played in the 80s, even though he actually did a great job in the 80s. Like Jordan, he was still a terror in the '80s. What's it called? Along with Dominique Wilkins and Larry Bird and everything. And people don't know this. I don't know if you know, Logic. Dominique Wilkins led the league in scoring once upon a time in his career, but they don't talk about that.
Yeah, he was a beast. Yeah, he was a beast since day. Yeah, but for some reason there isn't much said about him. Because Bird was there, Magic. So. But I don't know. Like Pippen in the '80s was like he wasn't much. So I'm like, how are you gonna take him for the '80s when he played what 3 years and he wasn't Pippen till the '90s? He wasn't the top 50 all time player. You know?
Yeah, I understand that. I wasn't. I still gotta echo. Um, okay, when you talk about Larry Bird, when you talk about Magic Johnson, you still got to throw Kareem in there because he did play in the '80s and he was in his prime. He was in his absolute peak, like in the later '70s. You try to talk about Hakeem. You got to talk about Charles Barkley, Moses. Even though he was more dominant in the early '80s and in the late '70s or whatnot. Of course, Isaiah, I mentioned him, Dominique, even Julius Irvin, even though he was better in the '70s and around the later '70s and everything. James Worthy. If people don't talk about if people don't talk about like Adrian Dantley, a lot of guys don't talk about Alex English. You don't, and people don't even talk about Dennis Johnson. But people don't know Dennis Johnson. Dennis Johnson was an elite defender and a good point guard. He could have scored if he wanted to all the time, but he was about team first. That's why he won a championship in '79. That was going in the '80s. And guess what? He played throughout his tenure with the Boston Celtics. So and John Stockton, he played in the '80s.
Yeah, I was just about to
Patrick
say.
Ewing, Patrick Ewing, he played in the '80s. Clyde Drexler, people, you got to
Yeah.
realize, Logic. The Blazers made it to the finals twice.
Wait, hold up. In the '80s?
No, no, in the night. I'm saying in the night, going into the night. But Clyde Drexler was in the '80s or whatever, and
Yeah.
then once they
Yeah.
started to kind of really get their niche, it
Mm.
was in the '90s. But Clyde Drexler played in the '80s.
Yeah.
Like he
No,
was
I.
nice in the
Mm.
'80s too.
Yeah, no, I know Dennis Johnson, the Celtics, and James Worthy on the Lakers. Yeah, those are big time players, but especially James Worthy. But as for but Drexler, even though yeah he played in the '80s, in when he made the finals, he was on the it was in the '90s.
Right. Yeah, understood. But he still came in the '80s and was a scoring force in his tenure. You got to think about it. What did you say, Don Lovato? You said no in the 90, 92 Trailblazers. Okay, yeah, that's what I was saying, Don Lovato. Salute to you. No, I'm just saying though, CB Logic. I don't want you to mistake that. Yeah, they made it in the '90s, but I'm talking about like okay, Jordan. He was a terror and he was a scoring force. But when did he get to the finals? In the '90s. But he showed his potential in the '80s amongst who he was playing against and everything. The team wise, it was gonna be the Detroit Pistons. It was gonna be the 76ers. It was gonna be it was gonna be the Boston Celtics. It was gonna be the Lakers. You there, Logic? I think Logic fell out like always. Yeah, but whenever you could come back in, Logic. Um, yeah, Don Lovato, man. We're just talking about '80s versus '90s because I everybody thinks like automatically that I'm gonna go ahead and throw the '80s under the bus. I love the '80s. I love the '80s. I love the '80s a little bit more than I love the '90s. Like, that's what I was telling somebody the other day. I I I like the '90s. When they had Penny Hardaway, and when we talked about yesterday about Penny Hardaway and Grant Hill and everything. But like a '80s Jordan, let's be real. There was nobody that was gonna stop it, and that was in the league during the time when the physicality. Yeah, I love the '80s. I absolutely love the '80s. Now, okay, were there some things that I didn't grasp? No, not at all. Okay, hold on. Okay, all right, you fell out. I thought you were just like, oh man, I'm sick of this guy. You there, CB Logic? CB, boy, you need to fix your phone. What you got, an iPhone, man? Okay, you said I
Just a
like the '80s
connection.
better. Yeah, I could tell. I
Yeah,
got an echo. You
yeah. You were
said it was
saying.
more fun. Basketball was rough and tough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was in the '80s, but
Yeah,
see, a lot of people don't realize that you had to have moves. You couldn't just have athleticism. You had to have moves in the paint, and you had to have moves out on the perimeter too, because guys were hand checking. It was a much harder game, and that's up for debate too. A lot of guys, they don't feel like that wasn't hand checking and stuff like that. It wasn't defense, but during that time, it was considered defense. You can't go back and you can't erase history, because if you do, then you would have to take all those championships away that all those teams won. They made rules as they went along. It's just like the 3-point shot. What are we gonna do? You're gonna go and boost up all those points that Jerry West had shot, or Walt Clyde Frazier had shot, or Nate Tiny Archibald had shot from beyond the 3-point range at that time. You have to look at stuff like that, Logic. Okay, you said in the '80s it was more about sport. Today is all about money. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shoot, they were all about the love of the game. I'm pretty sure there's some guys that are all about the love of the game, Logic, but they're for the most part back in the '80s and the '70s and the '60s, especially in the '50s. Uh, hey, Logic, I bet you didn't know this. There were a lot of guys, like we were talking about the Harlem Globetrotters, right, and the history of them. And I was just telling people that back in those times, man, uh, basketball was okay. You had guys that actually played in the NBA, and then you had guys that played in the NBA and they were actually working. They worked regular jobs. Like they would play the NBA season and then they would go work at like a steel mill or something like that. Yeah, you keep
yeah.
getting knocked.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had to close all the tabs and see. Yeah, it's much better now. Yeah. So yeah, you're naming the '80s, the '80s
Yeah,
players.
did you
Yeah.
hear? Did you hear anything that I was saying though?
No, just about the 3 point. You started about the 3 point shot of Tiny Archibald and all these. I guess you're referring to like the 3 point shot. Like if they,
Yeah, because
is that what you were talking about?
when yeah, well, yeah, if you bear with me, what I was saying though, Logic, is that if you sit up there, yeah, and you're saying that you know anybody says like you're overrated or anything like that, we can't list, man, that echo bad. Um um like when you talk about hand checking and you talk about everything that had went on in terms of defense, some people like, okay, well, that wasn't defense back then or anything like that. But you can't go back and erase history, because if you erase history, you have to take, what are you going to do? Take those championships away that they had to go through in order to get those stuff. Those rules were for that time. And what I was making the comparison is that, okay, everybody sits up there and says, okay, well, the 3-point shot and all this other stuff. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go to a player like Jerry West or a player like Nate Tiny Archibald or like Walt Clyde Frazier, who was shooting well beyond the 3-point shot, and what are you going to do? Jack up their scoring, because they were shooting threes before a 3-point shot. I guess logic fell out. But yeah, it was all about the sport. It was all about the team aspect of everything, and nobody everybody wanted to everybody wanted to win. Uh, but if I had to take my my pick, I'm going with the 80's. I'm definitely going with the 80's, man. In terms of the physicality, of course, the grit and the grind. Uh, there were a lot more players to deal with. Back during that time. That's no shade, to the '90s players or anything, or even the 2000s. But the '80's, man, you got to think there was a lot more parity during that stretch of time. Yeah, Don. Yeah, the '80's all the way. Uh, I don't even like to, like, sometimes I don't like to go '80's versus '90s, or '90s versus 2000 or anything like that, because you have to consider the first question that you got to ask is, okay, what rules are we playing by, or what type of changes are you going to make? Uh, is there going to be zone defenses allowed, or are there going to be illegal defenses, things of that nature? Everything was played much differently. Is there going to be defensive 3 seconds or offensive 3 seconds? Things of that nature. You have to take those things into account. But overall, like, I enjoy watching the '80's. Now, I like the fact that they used to actually let them play all the time. You said in the '80's, in the '80's, no super team, no superstar was jumping team. There were still super teams, Don Lovato. I'm not fully I'm not fully disagreeing, but there were super teams, but it was done organically. It was done organically, and then you got to think about it. The CBA, with the CBA and individuals that were able to, have more freedom, then that changed it. You said the '80's, but the '90s was my favorite era. Salute to you, Blackface. Y'all make sure y'all subscribe to my boy Blackface Sports. He definitely got a good channel, always bringing good content. Blackface, I noticed you haven't been on a panel in a few days, man. Y'all, we got to talk about that Earl Spence Blueface interview, man. Blu-ray, my bad, Blu-ray interview, man. It was on Monty Brown. We got to talk about that, bro. But yeah, the '80s, and see, a lot of people they would make the assumption because I like Jordan, they automatically think that, oh yeah, well, you like that Jordan that played in the '90s. Like if you look at that picture right there, um, Jordan was in the '90s, but a lot of people don't realize when he dunked on Mount Matumbo, that was in the '90s. But he was doing that on the norm. He was doing that on the norm in the '80s. That was of the norm. He became more of a shooter toward the end of his career, but he could definitely get up and stuff. But I liked Jordan in the '80s because of his raw athleticism. Don't get me wrong, he was fundamentally sound because he did have footwork. Yeah, hey, and blackface. That's the thing. A lot of people don't realize. I want people to go back and go look at Michael Jordan versus Lynn Bias in the '80s in college. Like that's how you supposed to play basketball. You supposed to be up and down the floor. Like and why you think I like guys like Russell Westbrook, like D Wade. Because those are the type of guys that they fly up and down the floor. They flying up and down the floor. They're everywhere. Like I'll say it again, blackface. D Wade, D D Wade reminds me of Jordan, how he used to play in the '80s. A lot of people don't look at that, but see, if you look at D Wade's game, and him growing up in Chicago, of course, that's who he paid attention to. So a lot of guys were gonna do their best to try to try to pattern their game after Jordan and everything. Kobe Kobe played like more '90s Jordan, with the fadeaway and all of that stuff. But he had the athleticism to mix too, and that's what made Kobe like such a real good scoring force. What's up, Celtics Nation? I see you in the building, man. How you doing, man? Hope you're doing good, brother. We talking about we talking about the '80s in comparison to the '90s. I'm pretty sure you were all about the Larry Bird and Lucky and all them. um, but believe it or not, I enjoy, like, a lot of people don't know that I enjoy watching Larry Bird, like, going back, like when I was younger. Of course, I would look at it like, what, Larry Bird versus Dominique Wilkins, stuff like that. Um, the big men battle. The big men battle. A lot of people don't realize. I mean, Patrick Ewing was athletic back in those days. Hating as fight. Yeah. Oh man. Hey, you know what, man? Blackface. I'm over that situation, man. I don't even. Chris Colbert, man. That dude right there, man. I don't even respect that dude like that. You say I remember when the Celtics drafted Lynn Bias in the '80s. Yeah, and he overdosed. Yeah, I remember that. You remember that, Celtics Nation, when Lynn Bias, and I know Blackface know who Lynn Bias was. Yeah, he don't matter. Yeah, he don't matter. Blackface. He don't matter. You say I like the '80s because my Celtics were the early 2000s. Is okay? You like the early 2000s? Yeah. See, the early 2000s ushered in a cream of crop of athletic. I mean, just highly athletic individuals. You talk about Baron Davis. You talking about I think what Desmond Mason, Rich. Even you got to say, Richard Jefferson. He was athletic too. Uh, even AI. Even though AI was drafted in the '90s or whatever, he was still part of that era. Shoot, man. Of course, Kobe, even though he was drafted in the '90s. Uh, man, who else? I think I said Desmond Mason. Um, who else, man? Um, I think I said Jason Richardson. Darius Miles. Uh, man. Jonathan Bender. Like all these guys, man. Like they came in and they came in with a whole. It was like a whole new breed. Yeah. Hey, you know what? And Blackface and Celtics Nation. I believe that if Len Bias didn't pass away, we would be having a conversation between him and Jordan as who's the goat. Cause Len Bias was just as much of a terror in college as Michael Jordan was at Maryland, playing for the Terps. A lot of people don't realize, man, Len Bias could play both defense and offense. He played defense and offense. Like Len Bias versus Michael Jordan. Man, that was an insanely man, them two dudes would go at it, man. For real, man. You said let's see. The early 2000s was last great era to me. Nah, I wouldn't go that far. I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. The NBA is they're trying their best to bring a lot more parity, bring the two-way players and stuff because in the '90s, more so in the '80s, man, you had guys that played more. They played both offense and defense. More two-way players. Uh, but you got to realize, man, there was a lot. The changes. They have they had an impact on a lot of that stuff, especially when you talk about the hand checking. And to me, then again, okay, I'll sit there and I'll say I like the '80s because it was physical, but then again, I like this generation too because if you can move without touching somebody or you can move your feet, that shows how really skilled you are because you have to be quick with your feet. You can't just grab because if they're gonna blow by you, they're gonna blow by you. You got to think about it. If if Jordan was to play in this era and without touching, like it would be, man, it would be difficult to stop Michael Jordan. Because of you back then, you got to be able to hold and hand check and stuff like that, and the physicality out was a little bit more. It's st- and listen, I'm not gonna sit here and say like the NBA is just so soft to the point where there's absolutely no physicality because it's still physical. You know what I'm saying? But it's not as physical as it once was. Back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Because if you go play a basketball game now, Go play with some of those guys right now. You won't be saying it's not physical because those guys, there's still a lot of bumping and grinding going on, especially in pickup games. Shoot, I played the other day, man. They still be, man. It's still a physical game, regardless. What's up, South Political? I see you in here, man. We're talking about the 80s and versus the 90s. Yeah, man. Polo in the era of the NBA. You talk about someone's mama. Talk about shopping at Piggins. You, yeah, yeah, you, yeah, Don, you right, man. It's really like you could fight and then not have to worry about getting thrown out of the game, and they'll just get right back. They get right back to it. Now, sometimes some players, they would, get if it got really out of hand or something like that. Yeah, there would be people getting tossed and everything. But for the most part, a little bit of shoving or somebody shoving somebody to the ground or something like that, or uh, Charles Barkley, Charles Barkley slapping another player or something like that. They let stuff like that go on. You know, but I I like the competition in terms of like the mentality. Like I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to stand next to you. I'm not trying to have dinner after this or any of that. I'm not trying to be your friend on the court. That type of mentality, you know. And there's a guy there's a couple guys that have that mentality in the NBA now. I'm not just gonna say, oh, everybody is friendly and buddy buddy, but for the most part, you're gonna see you're gonna see well, back in those days you would have saw individuals that really didn't get along. You're gonna see teams that really didn't get along, that absolutely hated each other so much to the point where people, the fans would get involved, and it was like a literally a lifestyle. It was like like those Detroit Piston days and everything like that. It it literally they took it really that serious, and a lot of people don't give the Pistons credit for as much as they sit here and they talk about the Pistons, how ruthless they played and everything. They don't get enough credit for the brand. They actually played a decent brand of basketball. These guys were fundamentally sound in terms of cutting, moving, strategizing, things of that nature. It wasn't all just, oh yeah. Now don't get me wrong, there was dirty stuff going on, but everybody played dirty. Everybody played physical back in the days, especially in the East. In the East, man, all teams were playing physical. Philadelphia would play physical. Milwaukee played physical. Detroit played physical. Boston played physical. Man. Even the Lakers, even though they were more finesse and everything, they still play physical. Uh, the Seattle Supersonics, they play physical. All of those teams, man, they play physical, man. It wasn't because then you got to think about it when you talk about '79 and all of that. Some people like, oh, I have some family members that argue that the '70s was way more physical than the '80s, and they were more. It was more up and down, more freedom, especially when you talk about the the ABA. The ABA, man. The ABA, man, that was a joy to watch. And then of course, the NBA had to steal from the ABA because the NBA started getting a little boring there. It started getting real boring. But yeah, man, I enjoyed the '80s, man. I enjoyed the '80s. I did like the early 2000s. I can't front. I like the early 2000s, and I don't get in like when somebody asks me, "Oh yeah, would you put the early 2000s up against the '80s or anything like that?" I don't like really having that. Uh, when you talk about because then you have to ask the question, okay, what rules are we playing? What rules are we playing by? That's going to be the biggest question. A lot of people didn't look at a '80s Hakeem Olajuwon. A lot of people didn't look at a '80s Patrick Ewing. I looked at them. those guys were those guys were really good, man. Really good. They look at Patrick Ewing. They look at Patrick Ewing like, okay, Patrick Ewing when in the '90s and stuff like that, which he was still he could still score and everything, but Patrick Ewing back in the days when coming out of Georgetown, like Patrick Ewing used to be able to run the floor, block shots and stuff like that, but he had a lot of injuries when he first came in, and plus we had to realize that guys were playing through injuries. Yeah, man, and I always I always look at it like this, okay? Oh, you said I remember playing basketball with kids would say Hakeem. Yeah, 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 Hakeem. Yeah, I used to make fun of Hakeem Olajuwon. Man, I'd be like, Hakeem Olajuwon, yeah, man. And look, that's why I have Hakeem on my starting five. I've said it time and time again. If y'all know me and y'all know my channel, because I want to say what Magic. I mean, Michael has Hakeem on his starting five as well. And I didn't choose Hakeem just because MJ chose him or anything like that. No, that wasn't the case. I chose Hakeem because I absolutely enjoyed watching Hakeem, and I felt like if he had really played with the type of team that he did, earlier in his career, he probably would have had a lot more chips. We pretend we were those superstars on the court. Yeah, man, it was fun to do stuff like that. Absolutely. Don, who's your favorite player of all time? Who's your favorite player of all time, man? I meant to ask you that last night. You probably like Magic, huh? Being that you a Lakers fan. I know you like Magic. And yeah, you like Magic, yup. I know a lot of people that think that Magic is better than Jordan. You know, I know a lot of people that think that Magic is better than Jordan. I know a lot of people that think that there was somebody that thought that that Dominique Wilkins was better than Jordan. Yeah, man, Magic. I don't have Magic as my starting point guard, but he was nice. He was nice. Magic was nice, especially at young Magic at Michigan State. Shoot, man, that Magic man. Shoot, he was. Who was your favorite? It was Jordan, but I had many different players. Like when Penny came in, I like Penny, and then of course AI was my guy. Even though he could he wasn't as successful as I would have liked him to be. Um, AI was still my boy. AI, as much as we talk about, how Michael Jordan had an impact on the game and Steph Curry had an impact on the game. People forget AI ushered in the hip hop style and rebelliousness. I mean, Rodman did too, but I got to give credit to Rodman too. Rodman was he ushered in that rebelliousness, getting the tattoos and things of that nature. But obviously, like he took it to a whole nother level, like freedom of expression. Oh, okay, you saw him in person. You saw him in person because I went to his junior high. I went to a junior high. I went to Jefferson Davis Middle, man. And I remember there was a yearbook when Allen Iverson he had a flat top. If you go to his high school, Don Lovato, you have the championship, because it was they were it was the Bethel Bruins, man, and you go. Oh, okay, on TV. Nah, uh, hey, I was blessed to see him in person. But you go into the gym, and there you have because AI played football and he played basketball. A lot of people don't know that he played quarterback. But they have a big old picture. It's painted on the wall, and it's got the championship squad. And Allen Iverson was on that championship squad. It's right there on the wall, right when you walk into the gym. And I was like, man. And see, like I'm gonna tell you something else too, Don. Yeah, but nah. I listen. It was a pickup game. Hey, he came out there just for a pickup game, Don Lovato. That was it, a pickup game. And when I tell you, it wasn't. It was a few people there, but he was still man. He was just as nice. He was doing the stuff like a lot of people think like uh Allen Iverson made jumping look so easy. Like he could jump off one leg and he could jump off two. He could catch alley oops. Like he was so quick and fast. Like when he would just be running, it would just be like it was like he was jogging in comparison to everybody else, and would just lay the ball up like just with ease. Sometimes he wouldn't even dunk. He would just lay it up. Yeah, man. And he would play fluidly. Everybody thinks that AI was just this is out of control type play. Nah, It's just that you got to think about when you playing it up against when you playing in the Big East during that time. Man, the Big East, man, that was a vicious conference to play in college basketball. When you talk about Georgetown, UConn, um, I want to say no, Georgia Tech was ACC. Um, who was in the Big East? It was Georgetown, UConn, Providence. Um, now you making me go back. I just remember all those teams, man. Yeah, well, no, Maryland was ACC during that time, but yeah, man, that was man. Villanova at that time they was Big East. Yeah, it was physical. It was nice and physical, man. Nice and physical. The way that basketball should be played. Nice and physical, man. Not none of this. So, oh, when you touch me, there's a foul. Oh, don't cry. Oh man, leave me alone. That's a foul. Nah, you better get you, man. You better stop whining. You get knocked down, man. Get right back up. Oh man, he touched me. That's a foul. You can't hold me like that, man. Stop crying and do something about it. Like I don't, I don't even like calling fouls. I But sometimes, man, some guys will get mad at me. Like if we're playing, if when we playing pickup and stuff like that, they be like, "Man, why didn't you call the foul and none of that?" Because it wasn't a foul. A guy could like hit me like really, really hard on the arm. You know what I'm saying? And it might look like a foul to somebody else, but to me, I'm like, man, it's a part of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, cause I like to get physical. Um, because like when you play in an actual officiated game, sometimes man they're gonna miss calls or whatnot. So that's kind of like practice. Like okay, they're not. Ain't nobody gonna feel sorry for you or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? If you in the game and stuff, you sitting there bickering and arguing with the referees when they don't call it. Well, then pick up. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just let it go. And then see, back in those days, Don Lovato, your hand was considered a part of the ball. Your hand was considered a part of the ball. So that's the way that's the way I look at things. But like you should I don't believe in calling foul after foul after foul. I don't like all that. Plus it slows the game down, man. If if I had a choice, if I really had a choice, man, I would play like New York rule, no blood, no foul. you know, no blood, no foul. Um, but I mean, I like today's era though too. It's like man, Polo, make up your mind and stuff like that. Some people tell me that, but I I look at it like okay, um, like if you're able to move your feet and keep up with your man without holding him, that says a lot about you as a player because that shows how quick you are. If you could beat that person to that spot or stay in front of them or what have you, you know. I mean, we gotta appreciate every era. You know what I'm saying? I don't sit here and say, oh yeah, this era this and this era that. Do I wish it was a little bit more physical? Yeah, I do. I wish it was a lot more physical, but these guys are playing 82 games, 70. I'm sorry about that, 70 to this year, 72 games. But you still it don't matter. 72, 82, they're still playing a lot of games. You go out there and you try to play. Shout out to LVZ too. He put this in perspective, and I'm gonna leave you with this. Shout out to LVZ NBA Talk. If you haven't subbed to LVZ NBA Talk, go sub to his channel. Okay, Don Lovato and everybody else is listening. Go sub to LVZ. He'll put everything in perspective for you. Okay, when it comes to the NBA, because that's he watched um basketball back in the days. You said yes, footwork is very important. I remember the hand was a part of the ball. Okay, listen. This is what LVZ said, Don Lovato. He put this in perspective, and I had to listen to what he was saying. He said, go try to play basketball for 82 days straight, and just mark it on the calendar. Like go play, one day. You know what I'm saying? Just go play pickup. Not just go work out and then go play basketball. Try to do that for 82 days straight, and then after about after about 3 weeks, see how you feel. But a lot of people they they work a normal job. They work a normal 9 to 5. You know what I'm saying? They might sit in the office all day and stuff like that, and then go play. You understand? Yeah, you said you couldn't do it, but see, when I was playing though, a lot of people don't understand that. We had to work out. Sometimes I would do 2 a days, and then on top of that, do the damn game. I would have to go play the game. You know, so like when you look at a guy like Kwame Brown, as much as they talk trash about this guy and everything, and they're saying, okay, well, that guy's a bust and all this other stuff. They don't realize that Kwame Brown was working out before games to try to get better. Like he would work out. He would work out before games. That's what Matt Barnes has said about him one time. He said he would work out before games. He'll be like in a full sweat, and then go play the game. Right. In high school football, with football. That's why I respect football too. Cause man, see, and I don't care what nobody say. I had an argument with a guy. He was talking about, oh yeah, football condition. I mean, basketball conditioning was way harder than I think it was South Political. Matter of fact, he said the conditioning in basketball. If you want to talk about cardio and stuff like that, yeah, I understand that. But just the all-out grind of football, day in and day out, it's no comparison. And they take football. They treat football like the military, man. Like you have to be on the field. Like it's like in basketball, you got to be on the court. Now everybody would be working out and everything like that. But man, like let's say you come up in there and everybody's shooting, they're just shooting, getting warmed up before they actually get into the routine because you had to start off with it's like a fast break, like a fast break drill. You usually start off with a fast break drill, and you do that for maybe about I say about like anywhere from like 20, 30 minutes or whatever. Then you warm up, and then you get into they separate the postman from the guards and all of that, and then uh y'all get into individuals, and then that's when y'all do like certain drills. Then you do your drill. You after you get done with your drills, then y'all might have to work on a certain play, and that's gonna involve the postmen and the guards, and you do that for a little bit, and then that's when you have to go up against each other, and but you have to utilize what you've been taught in terms of the play. Whatever the coach has drew up for you. You said football had more cardio. All we did was run and run. I don't know. Like, well, when I was playing football, yeah, they ran and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, but it was like weights. It was more weights. But see, uh, they don't utilize a lot more weight like the it's more conditioning now. It's like more cardio conditioning now. And believe it or not, a lot of anaerobic, lot of hit, like a lot of hit training, high interval um, training, high in, high intensity interval training. I've seen so many people quit basketball tryouts. Hey, facts. That's South. Hey, South is hitting on facts. Hey, and listen, Don Lovato. I know anybody that's played like at that level in basketball, they'll tell you, man, they would sit up there. There'd be these guys at lunch, like these people that really wanted to be on the team. They'd be like, yeah, man, I could beat him, I could do that and all this other stuff. And they'd be like, all right, no problem, man, go ahead and come to tryout or whatever. The coach would be nice to him and tell him, okay, when you want to try out, and just give him an opportunity and stuff. And man, they'll go out there, man. They would have to do the drills, do all this other stuff. Like some of them guys would be already having their hands on their knees, and they thinking that we done. They're like, nah, now we got it. Now we really, that was just warm up. And then that was just pre that nigga, that was just a pre workout right there. And then after that, you know what I'm saying? Then after practice, you thinking we done died playing after practice and stuff like that. If you start sprinting to the locker room and stuff like that, man, don't make that mistake. Then you're gonna have to run even more suicide because we had to shoot a free throw. At the end of practice, and if you uh if you miss one, you had to it was automatic 4 suicides. If you miss two, that's an automatic 8, and you had to do that shit in under a minute. You do it under a minute, rest for 30, back on the line. Under a minute, rest for 30, back on the line. And then you had to go back, and then you would have to shoot again. Yeah, man. Well, I never understood why God threw up. I don't know, man. And I was an asthmatic too. I shit, man. I used to love that shit. Believe it or not, man. I would love the fact of like, damn, man. I feel like I'm about to pass out type shit. I used to like that shit. My mom knew something was wrong with me then. I used to like that shit. I used to like to run, and I like the physicality. Like if I got elbowed or something like that, man, there would be guys they were thinking I was gonna get into a fight or something like that. Like, nah, man, it's a part of the damn game. Shit, now if somebody did it on purpose, then okay, yeah, we jump. But 9 times out of 10, they didn't really do that. It would be like, oh, my bad, kinfolk. It cool. Some guys would be like, man, ain't you gonna fight that dude or something like that? I'm like, nah. Sometimes, man, a guy's gonna swing his elbow and he might hit you in your nose and you might start bleeding, but that don't mean he meant to do it on purpose. That's why I don't understand why people get into it. Listen, you knew what you signed up for when you played the game. You knew what you signed up for. I don't want to hear no crying or none of that other stuff. Man, I'm finna pop trunk and all this other stuff. Man, why you even play if you knew that you was gonna get elbowed in the stomach? Why you even play if you knew you was gonna get undercut? You would have. You would have loved the military. Yeah, I had plenty of friends, and yeah, I knew something was wrong with you. Huh. You can't give one good compliment, can you? It's all good though. Um, yeah, the military man. I recommend it for anybody. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you structure. Uh, it helps you keep in shape. Um, I recommend it for anybody. You know what I'm saying? If when my son and my daughter says that they want to go in the military, I'm not going to try to stop them. If they say that they want to take basketball, play basketball seriously or any type of sport seriously, then go ahead and do it. I would recommend it. I strongly recommend it. Because of the discipline factor. Yeah, are you going to get in trouble? Yes, absolutely. Yes, are there going to be trials and tribulations? Tribulations, yeah, absolutely. But I think that the structure, the team aspect of that type of field, because some people some people needed that type of thing in their life, and you could tell like when you talk to somebody that has been in a structured environment, um, you can have dialogue with that person, but you can also tell a person, that wasn't really in a structured environment, that didn't play team sports or didn't really understand the team concept or anything. So, um, yeah, I recommend it for anybody, man. You know, I recommend it for anybody. I actually wanted, if I did go in, I would have wanted to do like Navy SEAL, something hard. You know what I'm saying? Like something real hard, like cream of the crop. I heard now that drill sergeants won't cuss you out anymore. Yeah, they you have to. There's a card that there's like a card that you have to show if they feel like you're offending them too much or something like that. But when my uncles and them were in there, and my cousins and all them, they were spitting in their faces, and not like hawking the loogie spitting or nothing like that. But I'm saying like there would be kind of like that drill that drill sergeant on what you did on Forrest Gump, or like the guy on Full Metal Jacket. It would be those type of drill sergeants. They don't, you can't do it quite like quite to that degree anymore. Even on Jarhead, I if my son was to enlist, I would want his drill sergeant to be like that, like Jamie Foxx in Jarhead. I would want him to be just like that. I would want that. Hey, I'll put it to you like this. You know that dude that played, be in them Allstate commercials. I don't know if y'all seen that movie. I'm gonna leave y'all with this because then I gotta go, y'all. But y'all know the guy that played in them Allstate commercials. He played on Love and Basketball too. The father from Love and Basketball. That's all. That's Allstate. That's Allstate. Um, that's Allstate's hands. Are you in good hands? That guy. Anyways, that guy was in Jarhead. Yeah, that guy was in Jarhead, and the guy he got in trouble because of what he did. I think the guy set the he set the he did something one night, man, and he set a whole bunch of fireworks. I think it was like fireworks or dynamite, whatever it was, and everything started going off or whatever. But you weren't supposed to do that. He was supposed to be keeping a watch on them. Yeah, Major League. Yeah, he played on Major League. Well, he had to stir the shit pot out in the desert, and then you had to burn it. And the guy was like, "Oh man, I wouldn't, not so fast, not so fast." And he went in there, man, and he took a shit. He took a shit, and then he was like, he said, "Not too hard, not too soft." And just water. I was like, man, that is fucked up right there. But that was his superior, and he had to do it. You know what I'm saying? But man, but yeah, it teaches you a lot of discipline, um, and you definitely get a lot of structure in there. But man, it's good. It's been good chopping it up with y'all, man. It's Polo Sports Talking ENT, and also Polo Sports News Plus. Don Lovato, thank you for pulling up. Uh, South, everybody else, Celtics Nation, Blackface Sports. Man, I holler at y'all.